Hey guys, Dan here. Welcome to another edition of Dan Reviews It, continuing with the Roseanne seasons, and this time it is season 3. This is maybe the best season for my money. I mean, I guess it'll come out, as I do the other seasons, as I rewatch all of these episodes, but this season is so good. Nothing got below a B for me this season. I think there's only 2 Bs in the whole season, right? There's 3. But there's 25 episodes, and all of them are at least of the, pretty good variety, and then some are just outstanding. A couple of A+. So, here's what's going on in Season 3. Roseanne has a new job now at the diner inside Rod Bell's department store, which is in the mall, and it just freaks, Becky and Darlene out because they hang out at the mall, and so it's like, oh my god, now my mom works here. So that's sort of what Roseanne has been up to. Also, there's a pregnancy scare in the beginning of the season, and then, Dan is doing the drywall stuff, but an old friend, Ziggy, arrives and kind of gets the wheels in motion of maybe doing a motorcycle shop. And so the season finale deals with a lot of that stuff. But the real crux of this season, and maybe the reason it's so great, is that it is all about Darlene and Becky growing up. There are so many episodes about the two of them, both individually and separately, at school with boys. Darlene goes to her first dance. So there's a lot of stuff going on with that. That just it hits home, as Roseanne usually does. It was right on the money in terms of, I've said this probably in every season review I've done, but I was Darlene's age when the show was on, so it hit home for me, a lot of the stuff that she was going through, and even some of the Becky stuff as well, because I was in high school by this point. So this season was not quite as watched as the previous season. That was the #1 show of the season, but it was still a top 5 staple. And this was on from 1990 through 91. So now we're in the early 90s here, and not a lot of stuff necessarily indicating that they're in the early 90s. Like last season, they had some specific references to things, and this season they do get a VCR. So, last season they had talked about it when they were about to get a big tax windfall or something, but this season they actually get one from Dan's father, so, oh my gosh, we finally got a VCR. So, all right, that part's dated, but for the most part, I think a lot of it pretty much still rings true, almost all of it, really. Jackie is not a cop anymore. She leaves that towards the beginning of the season. She gets injured, and she ends up breaking up with her fiance about it. And so, the last 2/3 of the season, she's kind of aimless. She finds some joy in community theater. There's a funny episode about that, specifically with her forgetting her lines in Cyrano de Bergerac. So that's pretty much what's going on in the season. This is just, again, I'll have to. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's others that are just as good or better, but this season is fantastic, and I think it might be the best one. Not rare, I think, for a show in its 3rd season to really find its stride. We're really, writing to the strengths of these actors now to sort of, mesh them with the characters they portray, and we see a lot of that here. Crystal, although she's in the opening credits with her name, she's not in that many episodes. She's in a small handful, but really, it's about the core family. Although we do introduce some people this season who remain some of my favorite characters throughout the series. Martin Mull comes on as Roseanne's boss, not immediately at Rod Bell's. She has another boss for a couple of episodes, and then Martin Mull comes in, I think halfway through the season, maybe a little bit later. It's the Valentine's Day episode, so I guess obviously that was more towards the end of the season, but him and Bonnie come in to that. Bonnie also one of my favorite characters. She does not appear that much after Roseanne leaves Rodbells, but she remains like in the core friend group. And then the debut of Mark, Becky's long-term boyfriend that she ends up marrying, and there's some great episodes here. He's only in maybe 3 or 4 episodes, but some episodes revolve around him. Her sneaking out to go see him. And even though he's not like in the episode per se, he's talked about. So he is sort of a staple of this episode. And then the other thing, and these are real minor characters, but they appear throughout the course of the series. Roseanne has to go into school, to Becky's high school at one point, for this picture that she supposedly flipped the bird in, and runs into one of her old friends from school. And so she becomes kind of a friend of the group. Her husband, Chuck, plays in Dan's poker games now, and in the barbecue episode towards the end of the season, they both appear. So that's really cool to see them. They sort of... So, because in earlier seasons, there were some of their friends I was just like, okay, like, I don't really care for these guys. The one that was all into Jackie last season, I didn't like him. And then the other friend that we see more of this season is Tom Arnold as Arnie. Of course, Roseanne and him were dating at this point. They weren't married yet, I don't think, in real life, but I think they were dating. And my question was answered in season 2. I couldn't remember when Roseanne sang the national anthem, but I was pretty sure it was between seasons 2 and 3, and it definitely was, because one of the first lines she has, maybe it is the first line, in the season premiere, the test, she comes out from the back into the kitchen, and she's like, oh man, I what a great day, I feel like singing, and it gets, some thunderous applause. So obviously a reference to the national anthem thing that was, quite a scandal at the time. So let's go through these. I mean, there's only 2 B pluses. I was wrong. There's only 2. B's. There's only 2 B's, and they're both fine episodes. A B is good. But for the purposes of this season, I have to pick a best episodes and worst episodes. So these are the worst episodes, but there's nothing inherently wrong with them. They're just sort of filler episodes. There's nothing really happening in them. There's some jokes, but it's just kind of like they're just there. They're worth a watch. I wouldn't avoid watching them surely, but the one is Home Ec, and that's just where they send a letter home to Dan, actually saying, they're having like a, I forget what it was called. It's not like Take Your Dad to Work, but your dad shows up and talks about his job or whatever, and Roseanne was like, well, why can't I talk about being a mother, being a homemaker? She was at the restaurant at the time, as a waitress, but she feels her real her full-time job certainly is head of household. So she goes in and teaches the kids how to shop. They go on a field trip to the grocery store, and it's it's fine, it's funny, whatever, but it's kind of a throwaway episode, so that's a B. And then second time around is the other B, and I had looked up what that was. I kind of actually forgot what it was. Second time around is, you know what, that's the one where Roseanne goes with Crystal to Lama's class, and Crystal and Ed, we find out in this season that Crystal is dating and engaged to Dan's father, and of course, we've seen from previous seasons that Dan and his dad don't really get along, so that creates a lot of problems. That was in an earlier episode, but this episode, Roseanne goes with Crystal to Lama's class, and there's like flashbacks to DJ's birth, and again, it's it's okay, it's all right to see some of these flashbacks, and there's some funny moments, but of all the episodes of the season, those 2 are the most kind of like blah. So there's those, and then there's 2 A pluses, which is Like a Virgin, which is when Becky goes on this date, and this is pre-Mark still, but she goes on this date, and Roseanne basically has the talk with her about sex, and let's not get pregnant, and Jackie comes in and tries to not smooth things over, but kind of, take the lead, actually, because Roseanne's like, well, your Aunt Jackie really gets around, so let her talk to you about sex. But then it ends up Darlene gets up, or gets felt up on the couch, and so when Roseanne and Dan come home, they think it's Becky, but it's Darlene. So that is just a great episode, and that theme of Darlene getting felt up over Becky is present in several episodes this season. It is a running theme and a running gag, really. Like at one point, Beverly comes over, Roseanne and Jackie's mom, and is sort of on Darlene's case, about, oh, you should be more like your sister, or whatever, and then Darlene's just kind of had enough. She's really putting her foot down with the grandmother, and at the table, this is one of my favorite scenes of the whole season, I would say, is when Beverly is like, oh, well, pretty soon Becky can start giving you tips about boys, and winks at her. And Darlene's like, oh, well, why don't you ask Becky who got felt up, and then winks back. It's great. I'm not getting these lines exact, I know, but my delivery, against Sarah Gilbert leaves a little bit to be desired. But the other A+ I've got is Becky, Beds, and Boys. And this is the first episode with Mark, the debut, and it is great. Him having to meet the Connors, and then Dan and Roseanne seeing him out at the bar later in the episode, and they're like, dude, like, you're dating our daughter, what are you doing here? Like, you're obviously not 21, this and that. And Roseanne goes to visit him at his apartment in a later episode, which is also great. There's a lot of, like, A's. Like, these are just the two best of the season and the two worst, but there's a lot of A's, A-minuses, as well. Like, a new job is an A. That's where Roseanne gets the waitress job. Trick or Treat, another A Halloween episode. This is maybe my most memorable Halloween episode, just because it's the one where Dan has the Three Stooges on. Like, he plays Curly, and he's got Moe and Larry on his sides, like paper mache, I guess, or whatever. Like, that always killed me. But it's it's an episode where where DJ wants to be a witch. And Dan is, like, really against it. Witches are women, this and that. So there's some interesting commentary with that I always liked. Bird is the Word gets an A. That's where, Becky supposedly gives the middle finger in the class photo. That's a great one. And then 2, towards the end of the season, Her Boyfriend's Back and Troubles with the Rubbles both get A's as well. Troubles with the Rubbles, that is the debut of Megan Faye as the stick up her butt next door neighbor. Her and Jerry, her husband, they're only in, I think, a season. I think they move away at the end of next season, if I remember correctly. But her and Roseanne really clash, and that's a great episode as well. And they're trying to make things right for their kids, because DJ and their son are the same age, and so neither one of them really has a lot of friends. So Roseanne goes over to her. I mean, this is another great scene, and it's not even that funny of a scene, but it's like a holy crap kind of scene. Like, Roseanne goes over and really, really sucks up her pride for this woman to make sure her son has a playmate, and that's a great scene. So not an A+ episode, but an A episode. So a bunch of really, really solid episodes, and the season, I average out all the letter grades that I give in a season, and then I weight them a little bit. If it gets an A+ or an A, it's a little bit more weighted. But this season gets an A. It might be the best season there is of Roseanne, but again, we still haven't even met David yet. There is a line that Roseanne says when she's with Darlene, about how come Becky gets to do everything, first and whatever. And Roseanne's like, oh, well, maybe Mark has a younger brother that you can date and give us a heart attack with, or whatever the line is. And it's like, I don't know if the writers had David in mind at the time, but that is just so brilliant if they did. And then, what else did I write? Oh, Leon being gay. Yeah, that's towards the end. That's in the same episode of, the mentioning of Mark maybe having a younger brother. It's the episode with Darlene's first dance. We find out that Leon is gay in that episode, which is pretty groundbreaking for 1991. A gay character that at the time he was not much of a lead character. He was certainly very supporting. He'd only been in a handful of episodes to that point, But as we know now, I mean, the Martin Mull character, Leon, he goes through the whole series. He ends up doing the Lanford Lunchbox with them as business partners. So, we didn't know it at the time, but yeah, he becomes a pretty major, supporting character, at least in the show. But one other thing I noticed this season that was certainly present in the first two, but it's something I've always loved about Roseanne is it's in the home ec episode. Actually, I really noticed it. But when she is talking, to the class in this episode, or in general when she's talking to the kids, or when she's talking to Dan or whatever, when she's sort of like I am now, like struggling to find a word maybe or something, she uses a lot of ums or okay, so, okay, whatever. And it's like, it's so authentic. It rings so true. There's so many shows where every word is just so specifically laid out and there's no ums or okays. And I'm sure when they wrote it, the ums and okays weren't in there, but Roseanne wanted to make it her own and wanted to, feel at home with the speech or with the script, I guess, and so she kind of adds in her own flair, and I just love that. It's so authentic. I say all the time on this podcast. I hate it. It's a crutch in radio. They call it a crutch. When you can't, and it's another one. Where you just are struggling to find a word or whatever, and you just come out with place filler or whatever. And Roseanne does that, and I've always appreciated that because it makes it ring more true. So that is the season 3 wrap up for Roseanne. Another great season, maybe the best one yet. We'll see as the seasons progress. And check out, of course, my episode by episode reviews of the new season. I'm posting those every Wednesday, the day right after the new premiere. I'm trying to get them up in the early afternoon too, so it's sort of fresh. If I ever get a Tuesday off, I'll actually watch the show live and record it and put it up Tuesday night, but I'm not home that often on Tuesday nights. I'm usually working. So anyway, that is it. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and check us out on Facebook as well. I always post the links to the new videos there on the Facebook group. So thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.